If you have a Bible, you can turn to Luke chapter 15. We're going to talk about grace again this morning. And Pastor Dan preached a great message last week on how grace is greater than anything. And at a British conference many years ago, actually, experts around the world were discussing what is so unique about the Christian faith. What is it that makes Christianity unique among all the other religions of the world? And they'd thought about the incarnation and the resurrection and the virgin birth and all these different things. And then one man walked into the room, a man called C.S. Lewis, a great philosophical mind, wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. And he said, what's going on? What's all the ruckus about? And so they told him what it was about, what they were trying to discuss, what were they figuring out. And he said, oh, that's easy. It's grace. And these people sat there a little bit longer and looked at each other and discussed it a bit more and said, yeah, absolutely. The most amazing thing about Christianity is the grace of God. Because it's mind-blowing, it's staggering, it's life-transforming. How can God love us so intensely and yet so freely? Because I don't know about you, there's nothing free in this world. There's always a catch, there's always a hook. You know, have you ever been to Starbucks and they've been stood there outside with a tray, some nice free drinks, a little bit of lemon loaf? It's not free at all. Because they're going to hook you, because once you taste that lemon loaf, you have to go in and buy some. And you can't just buy a piece of lemon loaf, you need to buy a venti caramel macchiato to go with it. And then they politely smile at you and say, thank you, that'll be $17 million. There's nothing free about it in the slightest. There's always a hook. You know, it may be hard to get our head around, and I don't know about you, but I struggle with this. I think about the love of God sometimes, and I think, how can he love me so intensely and yet so freely? How can he do that when I know what I'm like? And I think about Jesus when he came to this earth. He came with two purposes. One was to seek and save the lost. That's you and me. And the way that he did that was to reveal who the Father was. And I want to encourage you that every time you read the Gospels and you read about Jesus, look at how he refers to God. Because the most primary way that he refers to God is by calling him Father. Something that the Jewish mindset would not relate to God. They wouldn't understand him as their father. The religious authorities, the Pharisees up until this point, have just been all about rules and regulations. 613 commandments that they had to obey in the Jewish law, plus all the little sub-points that went with it. On and on and on with the rules. And Jesus says, no, I want you to know that God is your Father. He's the one who loves you more than anybody else in this entire world. The shortest verse in the Bible, John 11, verse 35. 2 words. Jesus wept. Jesus wept. A very powerful insight into who God is, because we can replace that word Jesus with God. God wept. God wept. Jesus wept because Lazarus, his friend, had died. Because Jesus is so involved in people. He's so intensely about people that when his friend died, he wept. And I want you to know this morning that God weeps over each one of us when we hurt. He is so intricately involved in our lives that he cannot not be hurt when we hurt. You know, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I think about God as a father, I struggle to really grasp what does that mean. What does it really mean to have a father? Because my dad was absent most of my life. He worked away for months on end, came home for a few weeks at a time. And even when he was home, he was pretty much absent then. You know, absent emotionally. We never really got a lot of love from him kind of physically. I mean, I'm pretty sure my dad did love me. I'm sure that what he thought he was doing by working hard to provide for his family was his way of showing love. But it's not enough. I don't remember getting a hug off my dad or my dad saying, I love you. And I don't know what your experiences of your dad is. It might be far worse than mine. My dad wasn't abusive. He didn't abandon me, but he was absent. And I don't know what your experience is, but Jesus wants you to know this morning, that's not who God is. He's nothing of the sort. Even if you've had the best dad in the world, he's nothing still like God. He hasn't got a finger on what God is. You can't touch God in terms of his fatherhood. But Jesus wants to show us, and we're going to look at this parable of the prodigal son this morning, even as we've heard about in that song. You know, I didn't know if I could get up here and preach after that song, because it gets me every time. That God's grace wins over everything in our life. And Jesus wants us to know that God is so different to anything we can possibly imagine as a father. That in 1 John chapter 4 verse 8 he says, God is love. 3 powerful words if we can get something of what it means. God is unselfish, undefiled, pure love. It's not just something he does, it's who he is. He can't help himself. Have you ever met one of those infectious people who you just can't help but be happy around? They're just so joyful all the time. You want to slap them sometimes. But they're just so fun to be around. It rubs off on you. This is who God is. He is love all of the time. In all that he does, he's loving. He can't help himself. And in 1 John 4 verse 9, it then says, God showed how much he loved us by sending his one and only Son into the world so that we might have eternal life through him. This is real love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as a sacrifice to take away our sins. We can't fully know grace until we know God better than we do. And until we understand who we are and why we need God's grace. God is not going to let you down. God is not going to abandon you. He's not going to be absent when you need you. He's not going to be abusive. He will be there every single time you need him. And so we're going to look at this parable, this story. This is Jesus' way of trying to help us to see more of who the Father is. And often this I don't know what your Bible says, but mine says the parable of the lost son is the heading. The parable of the prodigal son. Many commentators have said it's the wrong title. And I fully agree. Because it's actually more about God than it is about the son. It should be entitled The Prodigal God, or The Gracious Father would be a far better title. Because when we actually see what this father is like, we begin to see something about who God really is. And even the 2 parables before this in Luke 15, the lost sheep and the lost coins, it's about God getting excited about when people turn back to him. He gets anointed. He gets so excited. In verse 7, it actually says there's a party in heaven when one sinner repents, just one. That could be you this morning. You could just start a party in heaven this morning just by turning your heart back towards God. And we're going to have an opportunity to do that later on this morning. You know, God made you. You are not a mistake. You are not unwanted. You are loved so intensely, you can't even imagine it. You know, my daughter went to Winnipeg this weekend. She took her boyfriend back, and that's one of the hardest things that's ever happened to me when she got a boyfriend. As a dad, I knew it was going to be hard, but I didn't realize it was going to be that hard. And so she was driving him back because he can't drive, and gives them a little bit of time together. But I sent him a text. And it was a very polite text. But my wife decoded it for me. And she said, you realize that when he sent you that text, you know what it says. If you touch his daughter, he will kill you. It's very true. And that's a pale, pale, pale representation of God's love. No matter how intensely I love my own children, it is nothing compared to God's love for each one of us. And so we're going to read this passage very quickly. Bear with me because I can't see anymore. My wife delights in telling me I'm getting older. Verse 11. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, his son packed all his belongings, moved to a distant land, and wasted all his money in wild living. And about the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land. He began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his field to feed pigs. Great insult for a Jewish young man to be feeding pigs. The young man became so hungry that the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. And when he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired servants have enough food to spare. And here I am dying of hunger. I'll go home to my father and say, 'Father, I've sinned against both heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant.' And so he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, kissed him. His son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy of being called your son.' But his father said to the servants, 'Quick, bring the finest robe in the house, put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. Kill the calf we've been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now is found.' And so the party began." What an awesome story when we think about who God is in this story. You see, the younger son's just come to his dad and said, basically, "I wish you were dead, give me your money." That's exactly what he said to his father when he said, "I want your inheritance." There's so much that we don't understand about this in this culture, that is the worst thing that he could ever possibly say to his dad. "I don't care one thing about you, just give me the money. I want nothing to do with you. I want to live my own life." Incredibly hurtful, massive disgrace on the family as well. Everybody in their village would know what's happened, would bring great dishonor to this man because his son has said this to him. But the amazing thing is, when we see this, there's nothing of the father saying, "Right, that's it, get out. You want that, get out. I want nothing to do with you either." He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get hurtful. He's not resentful. The amazing thing he says, so the father agreed to divide his wealth. You know, I don't know about you, but sometimes as a parent, one of the hardest things to do is let your children have what they want, knowing fine well it's not going to be good for them. But there's a lesson to be learned. And sometimes you just have to say, okay, if that's what you want, then you can have it. And can you imagine that God's got billions of kids who do that day in and day out? I want nothing to do with you, God. I wish you were dead. You're dead to me. Just let me live life my own way. I'm happy, thank you very much. Leave me alone. Because in our sin, we reject God. It's exactly what sin is. It's a total rejection of who he is and everything that he stands for. That we're saying, I want nothing to do with you. Just let me live my own life. And we've got to begin to see how amazing God's grace is in light of this. Why should God be gracious to us when we treat him so? Why should he be gracious? He's got no reason to be gracious to us. He's got every right to say, fine, you want it, have it. That's the life you want, go and have it. And all the fun and hurt and pain that comes with it. It's all yours. Enjoy it. That's what we deserve. But as long as we don't understand how bad we are, we'll just keep forgetting and missing the powerful, amazing, staggering, life-transforming grace of God. Because that's exactly what it is when it comes into our life. And so we see this son, he's out there, he's partying, he's having a whale of the time. Goodness knows what he's up to. Doesn't give us the details, but we can guess. We know what a party lifestyle looks like. And maybe some of us are here thinking, well, what's wrong with that? God just wants to spoil my fun anyway. He's just too strict. All it is rules and regulations, isn't it? Is it? You know, Jesus is wanting us not to focus so much on the Son here, but on the Father. Because there's an amazing thing that's about to happen. Can you imagine what's going on while the Son is away? What's the Father doing? Has he just said, you know, good riddance. Sayonara, son, that's what you want. We'll see you later. Has he just forgotten about him? Written him off as a lost cause? Is that what we do as parents? Not at all. And in verse 20, we get a glimpse of what the Father's like and what he's been doing while his Son's off, living his life. He says, so he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long way off, these words are amazing. He saw him coming. His father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. You know, few words reveal something of God's Father heart than this. Because the Father wasn't just getting on with life, he was watching for his son. Every single day he was watching for his son, hoping that somewhere along in the distance he'd see him coming back. Every single day. And I don't know where you are with God right now. I don't know where you are in your life with God, how far you are or how close you are, but I can tell you this. God has never taken his eyes off you. Not once. Never looked away. Always hoping, always watching, always looking for that moment when we will just turn around. And something else happens here. In the next verse it says, he ran to him. Again, we don't get the cultural significance of this because a man over 30 in that Jewish culture does not run. It's incredibly dishonorable and disgraceful because they wore long garments, and to be able to run, he had to pick them up and be able to run. And so that was just a no-no. You don't do that. But he doesn't care. Why? Why is he prepared to suffer disgrace at the voices of other people who are going to see him running? Because he sees an opportunity to be no longer separated from his son. He's not waiting there. Just you wait till he gets here. I'll give him a piece. And what does he think he's doing coming back here right now? Not at all. The Father runs to him. He can't wait to get to his son. He doesn't want to be separated a moment longer than he has to be. And that's exactly how God is towards each one of us. That every time we turn our hearts towards him, boom, he's there. He is running towards us, arms open wide, full of hugs and kisses. You will know that you are loved by God when he gets hold of you. There will be no doubt. The second you return to him, he runs to meet you. Grace wins here every single time because it's utterly undeserved but freely given. That's why grace wins. Because we don't deserve it. We can't earn it. There's nothing that we can say to God, look at this. He just gives it as freely as he possibly can. I don't know where you're at today. I don't know where you need to experience the staggering, amazing, life-transforming grace of God. But it's available this morning. You know, we have stickers on our church windows and on our cars that say, no perfect people. It's not just a great little phrase. We utterly believe it. Every single person in this church is imperfect. Sorry if that offends you. But compared to God, there's not a single one of us that meets his standards. And so we come to him broken, in need of help. And I want you to see who the Father is here, because just as we see this Father in this story, he's not stood there waiting to give his son a piece of his mind. God is the Father that's running towards us. No hatred, no resentment, no bitterness. There's no retaliation in God. It's forgiveness, 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 love, mercy, grace. That's who God is. That's the God that he wants us to encounter this morning. That's who Jesus wants us to see. It doesn't matter what you're playing in your head right now, and I know some of you are, but you don't know what I've been through. You don't know what I've done. You don't know what I'm capable of. I know this. I know that every single one of us is capable of the absolute worst sins imaginable, because we're human, broken people full of sin. Could any one of us turned out to be somebody like Hitler or Stalin? Absolutely. Sounds very offensive, but it's inside each one of us because of sin. But it doesn't matter what you've done. You say, well, God can't forgive me of that. Yes, he can. Yes, he will. Yes, he wants to. Because he's a gracious Father, and his grace wins every time. I remember reading a story. It was in Philip Yancey's book, I think, What's So Amazing About Grace. And he tells of a friend of his who was a pastor. And him and his wife were battling with their 15-year-old daughter. She was taking birth control, and she wasn't coming home some nights. He said there was a lot of lying and deceiving going on. And he said the worst thing that happened was when she turned things around to make it our fault. To tell us that we were too strict, that it was our fault. If we'd have just been a little bit less strict, then this wouldn't have happened. And he said, I remember standing in the living room one evening, late at night, looking out the window into the darkness, wondering, where is she? What's she doing? What's happened to my daughter? And he said, I so much wanted to be like the father of the prodigal son, gracious and accepting, but he said there was so much anger and rage. He said, I was so furious about all the lying and the deceiving, twisting of our words. And he said, I just remembered at that point how God used the Old Testament prophets to express his pain towards Israel when they turned their back on him and just walked away, worshipping other gods, doing goodness knows what. And he says it wasn't until the early hours of that morning that his daughter finally came home. But he said the minute she walked through the door, all that anger just went. He said, all I wanted to do was hug her and hold her, tell her how much I loved her and how much I wanted the best for her. He said, I was a helpless, lovesick father. And you know, God is not helpless, but he is a lovesick father. He is so intensely committed to us and loves us so deeply. You know, Psalm 103 verse 13 says he has compassion on us. And that word compassion is an empathic love. It's a gut-wrenching love that when somebody that we know does something wrong, it turns us inside out because we feel the same pain. And that's who God is with us. He's got great things for us, and he hates to see us hurting ourselves. We're his son, we're his daughter, we are infinitely precious to him. And his grace wins every time we turn our heart back to him. He's already proved how much he loves us because he sent Jesus. If you ever begin to doubt the love of God, look at the cross. Because it's an eternal reminder of how much he loves us. That we can, instead of receiving his punishment and his wrath of our sin, we get to be the recipients of his endless, amazing grace. Grace that wins every single time. And so there's a question today. Will you accept it? It's a very simple question. Will you come home today? Will you turn your heart back to God today? Stop thinking about all the things that disqualify you or that you think disqualify you from receiving God's love, because it's those very things that qualify you for the grace of God. Did you get that? The very things we think disqualify us from God's love are the very things that entitle us to receive the grace of God. Grace wins every time because God's love for you is greater than anything in this universe and stronger than any sin you can ever commit. It's powerful, it's life transforming.